And we're talking about pitching today. And one thing I want to start with is the creative pitch. A lot of people are like, how do I pitch? What do I do? What do I say? How do I stand out? But why is that creative pitch really powerful for us to think about creating and crafting, especially if we're not active on social media, where people can't really see what we're doing on a day to day?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think let's put it this way, right? Um, let's say, for example, you're out there and you're trying to get people's attention. Whether you're doing like, let's say you're doing some promotion on the streets because you've got a new bar that's opening up, right? Now, to me, there's one way that you could do it, which is essentially you just go out and hand out flyers and hope that just by pitching to enough people, people just check out what you've got. They'll check out your store. Or another way where you really start getting creative, where you figure out different angles, where instead of just handing out flyers, um, you have, you have like a mascot where it's like, hey, give me a hug and you get something for free. Or you have an offer where it's like, hey, we're giving away, free Dominoes or free pizza for our first hundred customers. Now, why should you care? And what does this have to do with pitching and being creative with pitch for podcast? Well, the exact same thing is happening. Let's say you're in a crowded space, and you as as an expert, as a entrepreneur, you're trying to guest on a bunch of people's shows. But the thing is, the people you're trying to be a guest on their shows, they're getting thousands of pitches every single month. How are you going to stand out? What makes your offer different? Because if they've seen your pitch 100 times before, they're going to ignore it. That's just a subconscious thing that happens. So really creating a pitch that stands out, that is creative, that makes someone go, you know what, that's something different. That made me laugh. That made me feel something. That's how you really stand out. So why do you need a creative pitch? You need it to stand out because more and more and more people understand the value of podcast guesting. People know that's a great way to position yourself as an authority. It's a great way to build out your network. It's a great way for you to shortcut your way to a massive audience. So having a creative pitch allows you to stand out amongst the crowd. That's really why it's so important.
So, where would you say that most people go wrong when pitching podcasts?
I think the main place that most people go wrong, you know what, this is something that I had to learn the hard way because back in the day with clients, what we used to do would kind of honestly, it's kind of embarrassing. We would look at what other people were doing and then just copy them. And we're like, oh, we get all these types of pictures, they must work, so let me copy them. And what this typically looked like when we copy them was, well, everyone out there, they're talking about their credibility. They're talking about how they wrote this book and that book. They're talking about their story. They're giving you this long monologue of their backstory, how they went through hell and they were eating pizza from a dustbin can, and then they built a multi $8 million business in 3 days, and all this crazy, all this insane stories, right? So we thought, you know what, let's start doing. Let's give that a go. And we sent out, maybe 100 pitch, no, barely any replies. The people who did reply were like, "No, not interested. Sorry." And I was like, "Huh, that's interesting." And then eventually we came across, this guy who pitched to us in a very different way, and something about it stood out. And the guy didn't mention, you know, himself. He didn't even mention like his credibility. He didn't mention any books. Didn't mention the story. He just specifically focused on extremely captivating topics to our audience, to our client's audience. And that stood out, was so different. So where most people go wrong is kind of what we were going through when we first started a couple of years ago, where you just copy what everyone else is doing. Generic pitch, mass pitching, talking about yourself, which is a massive one, and talking about your credibility. That's really where most people screw up, forgetting that, again, everyone else is doing that. You're not going to stand out. That's really the main place where people again screw up.
I love that you pointed that out too, because one of the things that I say no to all the time is when they start with themselves. And they're like, hey, I'm this and I'm really, and I'll think, and I'm like, that's great. Your credibility is awesome. But what are you going to do for my audience? I want you to add value to my audience. So I want to know that you actually put in the work to see who I'm talking to and what they want and need. And then to be creative with those topics that they're pitching to me, right? So you just hit the nail on the head on what I look for when it comes to pitching because I get a lot of generic pitches and I'm like, "Well, I could help elevate you, but that's not the point. I'm trying to elevate my audience. Like I'm trying to give them stuff that they can use and make an impact. So, one of the things that I like to see is that they have done their homework. So, how much research should someone do before pitching a podcast?
So look, there are two sides to the coin, right? The first side of the coin is if you want to go the lazy route approach, which essentially is mass pitching. Now, what this typically would look like is you just you go for volume. You know, you aim, you shoot, you spray, you hope someone catches on and books on. So for that type of pitch, it doesn't need to be as personalized. However, for our clients, and we found this to work way better, is you make a list of like 50 to 100 dream clients.
Mm,
Pardon me, I'm in business mode here. Dream podcasts that you'd like to be a guest on, right? And you would essentially go through a qualification internally of, hey, what shows do I want to be a guest on? Okay, I'm an expert in, anxiety. Okay, well, I shouldn't just go on just a business show. Okay, I need to go on shows about anxiety. So, firstly, just starting with what shows do I want to go on, right? The second phase is investing and qualifying, finding the right shows, going out there, doing research. And then from that aspect, once you find these right shows that will be a perfect fit, then doing the personalization, then figuring out, hey, look, what is missing in their show? What things are they smashing that you love? But what's missing? What haven't they spoke about around anxiety? I realized I haven't spoken about how anxiety might affect, your actual physical, mental health brain, when you're 50 and it increases chance of dementia, as in a random example, and how to prevent that. That's a unique angle that you've gone out there, you found these shows that you believe would be a perfect fit for you. You've then identified a gap in the host and the podcast in terms of their content, something that's missing. And you're saying, hey, look, I'm willing to fill that gap. Hey, I noticed, and we can get into like the actual intricacies, but I noticed that you spoke about anxiety a lot, but you haven't covered this angle. I was wondering if you think that would be potentially something that would be worth sharing with your audience. That then presents not only shows you've actually done your research to the host, because again, you're trying to sell the host, but you're trying to sell the host on why you're a perfect guest for their audience. So that's the first thing. So you're showing the host you've done your homework. And the second thing when you do this is you're showing the host that you actually care for the audience. You've shown the host the value proposition and how their audience lives are going to be better. No host is going to get a pitch where you've basically said to them, hey, I think this is a gap that you might be missing, and I would love to fill that with X, Y, and Z topic. Are you open to discussing how that would help your audience? They were like, oh my God, finally, someone with a decent pitch. So that's really it.
I love that so much. It's not like you have to spend hours trying to craft the perfect pitch.
No,
It's just that you're really catering to who they are and what gaps you can fill.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, and that was kind of one of my questions is how can you personalize a pitch without spending hours on each? So, what would it look like? Say I had 50 dream podcasts I want to pitch. How much time could I realistically think I'm going to have to spend on crafting them?
Yeah, so in terms of how much time, like for each person is going to be different. But I'm gonna make the assumption you're a busy business owner, an expert, you've got a bunch of different things going on, maybe a couple of kids who are being a bit naughty, might be a bit, not feeling great, you have to take care of them, wherever it might be. Life is chaos. The point is I'm gonna assume you don't have enough time and you're strapped for time. So the best thing that we tend to find is simply going on to so you have those 50 shows. The first thing is open up your streaming platform, Apple, Spotify, find their podcast, and then just have a skim through. And you should really ideally have some core talking points and angles you think are unique that you haven't seen spoken about before. And you're just going to go through each one of their shows and past episodes and see have they covered this in the last 10, 20 episodes? No. Okay, well, if they haven't covered in the last 10, 20 episodes, typically podcasts are on a weekly release schedule. If they haven't covered in the last, that means that for the last maybe, month or two, they haven't covered this topic. Great. So you haven't got to go through the entire back catalogue, but it's like how timely is the content you're trying to produce. So really that process can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. and you wouldn't want to go through and qualify all 50 in one go. You'd want to maybe just set a goal of, hey, I'm just going to just start by qualifying, five a day. That should only take me like half an hour a day. By the end of, mid next week, the following week, you've qualified all 50 and you know the unique angles. So it can be really as simple as that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dive into personalizing the pitches and making ones that truly stand out. Now, I want to make it really practical. Like I talked about in the beginning, you ended up a speaker in the conference because of how you pitched me for the podcast. And I just you were talking about sometimes they make you laugh and whatnot, but I really found your message refreshing and it did actually make me giggle. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. But if you're okay with it, I actually want to read a portion of your pitch just to get us
Yeah, go for
started.
it.
And then we're going to talk about, what made it work for me and then some ways for others to stand out as they're pitching. Now, this isn't to say copy everything Anthony is doing because your pitch should be your personality and it should be based on what you're doing. But essentially, here is what he said. He said, Hola, Gabe. I hope you're doing, or I think what you're doing with pursuing goals God's way is awesome. I know you probably get pitched more times than a personal trainer in January, so I'll get straight to the point. And I hope you do too by responding with either yes, Anthony, or no, Anthony. You suck. Even my dog said no. My pitch, I thought that's where I laughed. I was like, oh my gosh. My pitch to be a guest on Pursuing Goals God's Way. Which one of these topics would make for the most valuable, interesting conversation to your audience? Then he pitched me three topics, and they were very specific. And so I knew that did his homework to see kind of what I talk about, but what maybe was missing. And then he ended with, so which is it, Gabe? Yes, Anthony, number X seems great. Or no, Anthony, you suck. Even my dog said no. Don't worry, I can handle either. And that was it. Like, you didn't tell me anything about your background. I mean, your website was there, so I could go check out your website and things like that in your signature. But it really led with me and my show and my audience. And that was refreshing. And I don't know, I think it had a little comedic relief, how you say that.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's what caught my attention. Now, I'm guessing maybe you use this pitch exactly like this for others. Maybe you change it up a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about how you crafted this and how you determined it could stand out.
So, you know what's interesting? So, the first thing that you'll notice with the pitch is we kind of just get straight into it, right? So, just start and personalize. Hey, I think what you're doing is awesome. Great. Psychologically, and a lot of this is psychological things that we're doing. Because again, we have to think from I'm pitching to a host who gets pitched a ton, but not only that. So in isolation, yes, the host gets pitched a ton. But when someone's on email and they're going through their email, what is their frame of mind? Well, their frame of mind is I'm hella stressed out. I've got so many emails to get back to. I feel like I'm getting bogged down and lost. I'm probably feeling a bit anxious about how my day is going to get started, where I'm going to go. And oh God, please, God, no, not another pitch. That's quite literally the state of mind of people going in their email. Like we've all been there. We get a marketing email. Like, why is this? This is so like this is so irrelevant. Why have I got this? Why is this here? you know. So that's the first thing we have to understand. And how I learn to create pitches like this, there's certain principle. So the first one is humor, right? Using humor to just diffuse the situation and being very self-aware. Everyone has to get pitched. And for me, so how our business was able to scale to, multiple six figures per year was by us generating leads through cold email. Now, the general perspective of everyone with cold email is cold emails didn't work and everyone hates cold emails. Everyone hates a crappy cold email that looks like a crappy cold email.
True.
But everyone loves why do people love, Dragon's Den or Shark? Was it Shark? Shark Tank. People love to watch pitches. They do love to watch it. It just has to be a good pitch. So how you make a good pitch, and for me, having to sift through the noise when I'm doing cold email to people, I had to figure out how do I get people to respond as quickly and as warmly as possible. How do I make sure that even if someone says no to me, I haven't screwed up with my brand and I've actually left them in a positive way better than I found them? So to do that is to elicit humor. And when you use humor in the lines of, you can either respond with yes and or no and you suck. Even my dog said no. It lightens things up immediately. Their people's anxiety, their stress levels reduces, their barrier to you reduces, it humanizes you instantly. And again, why this is important is because the state of mind they were before they opened the email was stressed out, annoyed, frustrated, feeling bogged down, really stressed out, high anxiety, and now they're laughing and smiling. That's a positive emotion you just gave them. So the first thing within the first 2 lines, we're just getting them to like want to actually read the rest of the email. And then we don't go about my story because they've seen that 1,000 times, but then just go straight to the topic. Why is this relevant for them? Why is this relevant for their audience? And then we end off again with, okay, well, we've gone from opening, being humorous and, boosting the ego. This is awesome. Then we go into the actual, the humor to lighten them up and to reduce their barrier to, their barriers. And then we pitch the actual value topic. And then what do we do? Because again, we're going to serious. And then we end with humor. So what is it? Yes, and why not? Or no, and you suck. Again, positive emotion. And when you do that, it warms people up so much to you that even when, like Gabe, you said, hey, no, this isn't a fit, but you had to then invite me to something else because it was just such a good pitch. So that's kind of the breakdown in terms of how to think about it. And I really want to give the principles here. So how you apply to each of these principles of, breaking down someone's barrier, being self-aware, being very direct, and then adding in some humor, you can do that 1,000 different ways. So don't just copy and paste this pitch and try it for yourself. Like, if you did that would it work? Yeah, but also be creative. Think about how you would like to be pitched and then go from there. Again, give you the principles so you can apply it in any aspect rather than just here's a tactic, because tactics changes, they change every bloody second, but the principles are really what sticks.
Yeah, for sure. And I like how your pitch was short and sweet. Like I didn't have to read a ton of things and all the background and all the things because a lot of times when I get a long pitch, I just say no anyway because I just don't have time for it. I don't want to read it or I just don't even answer it. And so getting to the point quickly is going to be really really important. Now, what do you do with follow-up? So if you don't hear back from someone or if they say no, how can you turn that no into a future opportunity? I guess that's 2 questions in one, but
Yeah, I love that. That is a good question. So typically, you will get those. That's part of the game. Got to build a thick skin. It's part of the game. But it's interesting what you mentioned in terms of follow up. So most of the time, when someone, if you're an expert or a business owner, you know, you just pitch once and that's it. But you need to follow up because people are busy. Might the non-response be a no? Yeah, but it could also be 1,000 different things. "Oh, I love that pitch, but my little ones just fell down the stairs. Oh, I love that pitch, but I now have a sales call. Oh, I love that pitch, but I now need to go out for dinner. Or I love that pitch, but I'm now going to Sunday mass. Or I love that." The point is, anything can happen in someone's life that would distract them from getting back. Again, we've all been there. I've been there. I'm guilty of this. I'll receive an amazing email. Someone boosts my ego, tell me how amazing I am. They tell me how this opportunity, they present something great to me. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. And then the next minute I forget about it and I go on. And then I remember maybe a week later or a month later, go, oh, damn. And now I'm a bit embarrassed to reach back out and say that, oh, I screwed up, blah, blah. So being aware of that is like people oftentimes do like your pitch. If you follow the flow we've gone through, they might not respond straight away just because life happens. So you need to follow up literally at least minimum of 3 times. Now, it's going to be important. This can either be extremely successful with your follow ups and you get people literally laughing at the follow ups you have, or you have people who tell you, F off, you suck, this is terrible, I'm going to report you. You can either do it the right way or you can do it the wrong way. And don't get it twisted. There is absolutely a right way to follow up and a wrong way to follow up that will lead to you ruining your reputation, not getting good responses, and essentially not actually getting booked on these shows. So, what's the wrong way to do it? And then we can go into the right way to do follow ups. The wrong way to do follow ups is by saying, hey, did you see that? Hey, just checking in. Hey, by the way, have you seen this thing? Oh, yeah, by the way, like I reached out to you last week. Have should we do this? Oh, here's my link. Here's some resources. that is, again, no one likes a nagger. No one wants to be feel like they're being pestered. When you follow up in that way, you are pestering people. That's annoying. Don't do that. However, Gabe, the right way to do this, again, is remembering what we spoke about. I'm going to keep going back to these principles. What is the state of mind of most people when they're in an email? They're highly anxious, they're bogged down, their stress levels are super high, and they just feel like they're being buried with work. That's the state of mind. Now combine that with the state of mind of someone being followed up with when they didn't respond the first time. They're what? Annoyed because they ignored you and you're back again and you're following up with them. They're stressed out already because they've got 1,000 different emails to respond to. They're highly anxious and they're just feeling super stressed. So what do we need to do? We follow the same principle that worked initially. Add humor. Memes. Memes have got my clients and myself booked on more podcasts than I could even imagine. Like and very specific memes, right? Humorous memes. So what we do with our clients is we figure out, okay, again, based on human psychology, what's gonna get them to respond in a positive way. We just add like a very funny meme of someone either waiting or like, like a skeleton, just something that just instantly they know. Or like maybe let's say there's like a scene, a gif of a scene in Friends when someone gets ignored or someone, missed an opportunity. Just add in a small meme and then saying, hey, me, but me waiting to respond from you, sad face. Something so small and subtle. People love that. Because again, you're humanizing it. What they used to, open the email feeling highly anxious, feeling highly stressed, but then when they get a follow up and they're expecting to be annoyed at you and they see a meme, they crack a smile and they go, you know what, I'll give them a chance. So each of your emails you can start with a meme and the next one can be a value prop again. And again, just adding the humor. Another one that more tactical one that we used to do was like, hey, I reached out to you X number of days ago. Either you've been eaten by alligator or you completely hate my guts. If you've been eaten by alligator, let me know and I'll send flowers, my regards to your family. If you haven't, it's most likely that one of these has happened. Scenario one, two, and three, you just list out what scenarios it might have been. And then you give them again, hey, so should we do this or should we not? Give me a yes, and this sounds great. No, and you suck. Again, bringing that humor. So doing that is what we've found to be the best way to follow up. And you never get people responding in a negative way because it's just it's very hard to because they're just laughing. So that's what we've found to work super well is adding humor once you're following up 3 times minimum.
Okay, I love the idea of adding a meme. I wouldn't have even thought about that actually, but it would definitely be a great follow-up. If I got that in my email, it would at least make me smile if it didn't make me say yes. So, yeah, I love standing out, like thinking about how to stand out in your follow-up as well, not just in that
Yes.
initial pitch. And also the follow-up super important because I know for me, sometimes I just don't respond because I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what to say yet. And then I just leave it or I delete it or whatnot. But if someone follows up with me, I know they're serious as well. And that follow up can be very important. So, I mean, we're talking podcast pitching more so, but this can work for all different types of collaborations. If you're working on getting in front of other people's audiences, that pitch is important, whether you're doing it in a DM because you do use social media DMs, or you're doing it in an email or wherever it is that you are, that is going to be key. So I'm curious, how does a solid pitching plan actually lead to increased business growth? Why is it important for us to have that solid pitching plan so we can get in front of those audiences? What can that look like for our businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's say you're in a spot where, you should be on social media, but you hate social media. You know you should have an audience, but you don't have an audience. You know you should generate more leads, but you currently don't get consistent leads flow. And right now, if you're trying to build things from scratch, you're probably experiencing what we're all experiencing, where reach is becoming harder and harder. Building an audience from 0 to 1 feels like you're fighting the algorithm, and you don't even want to be partaking in the algorithm. You want to build your authority, but no one knows you because you're the unfound gem. You're the treasure that still feels like you're invisible. You feel like you're screaming to an empty void no matter how hard you try. Most people are stuck here For honestly, most businesses, again, most businesses do end up failing and kind of like not being able to make consistent lead flow and with the authority because of these reasons. Now, most will try to fight and break and try to break through, but then there's a different path that people don't really think about, which is I can either try to build this thing from scratch, or I can just find my customers where they already are. I can find my ideal audience where they are already consuming content. Podcast pitching is the best way for you to shortcut your way to a massive audience. It's the fastest way to shortcut your way to a massive audience because it allows you to get in front of a crowd where it's not like these people don't know, like, and trust you. No, no, they know, like, and trust the host. So when you're a guest on someone else's podcast and you're the one who's being interviewed, guess what? The spotlight is on you as an expert. Guess what? You're the one who's being the source of value. Guess what? This isn't TikTok where you've got 15 seconds to try to sell yourself and hope someone loves you based on 15 seconds and then goes through your funnel and buys from you. It's where you have an extended 30 minutes, an hour-long conversation where you're the expert, where you're the one who's presented as an authority, where you're the one who's tapping into thousands of listeners who are the ideal potential customers for your business. Just think for a moment what that would be like to be on a show where you're being interviewed, where you know that every single listener, they've got thousands of listeners, and they're all the ideal clients who you've worked so hard to reach but haven't been able to at this point. What would that actually do for you and your business? It's huge, right? It'll make a huge
Huge.
difference. So that is
Right.
the power of guesting on other people's shows and why you need the right pitching plan in the first place, because it opens so many doors. We've had clients who literally turn someone else's audience, multiple clients come from that. Their network builds from that. Their authority builds from that. And this flywheel gets created because other authorities are now respecting and seeing you as an authority because they listen to the podcast where you are a guest on the podcast they listen to. So there's this whole network effect that happens as well in regards to that. So as a business owner, you needed to build your authority, shortcut your way to a bigger audience, build out your network in the process, and turn an audience who's now warm into paying clients to your business. That's what you need to pitch and the right pitching plan.
Yeah. And a couple of other things that I was thinking about is when you're pitching podcasts, you don't need an audience. They don't know how big your email list is or anything like that. So it's a really perfect opportunity to get in front of a larger audience, even if you start at zero. And it's evergreen. So it's not one and done. It's not like a Instagram post where it's there for like 10 minutes. It's there for as long as the podcaster keeps it up on their hosting plan. So people can find you years to come. And it's not just that initial interview, that initial publishing day or week that they will see you. You'll have that extra visibility. Now, I'm curious because obviously getting into onto podcasts, like doing these collaborations is to grow our audiences, to grow our businesses so that people can see what we have to offer and the services or products that we have. Is there do you have any tips in the ending, because I know a lot of times on podcasts people see where can we connect with you, or you have this one opportunity to share where they can find you or give them something. Like, do you have any tips on that ending portion of just being on the podcast itself?
Absolutely. So there's really two things here. So the first is for you internally getting clear on why am I pitching? Is this to grow my social media following? Is it to build my authority? Is it to make more sales in my program? Whatever that is, that's what you need to have in mind when you're getting to the end of the actual interview. Now, if I know, for example, that my goal, let's say, for example, I'll use this as a prime example. Let's say I'm on here and I'll try to demonstrate this because, of course, if you're watching the conference, you'll see my offer and this will demonstrate how you really make sure you leverage that and get people taking action. If you know you've just been on a show and spoke about guesting and the value of guesting, just ask yourself, what is the logical next step that a potential client who's listening into this, what steps would they need to take in order to actually get started with what I've just spoken about? That is what you want to present as a free resource as a value add to the audience. So you want to give them something for free. If your goal is to make more sales, you want to give them something for free and say, hey, look, I have, what I've done for you guys specifically, I've done two very specific things. One, I've just created, we've spoken about pictures all day and all night. And you might be thinking, well, that's great, Amber. How's it going to work for me? That's great, Amber. What do I do with my followers? That's great, Amber. Do you have more examples of these things? What does it actually look like? Well, hey, guess what? Not to worry. What we've done is we've created a perfect pitch swipe file that has every single thing when it comes to, proven, pitches for you to get booked, proven pitch and templates to get booked. You can see the exact emails of the best performing pitches that our clients are using. And we even include specific subject lines to make sure you get booked and you get read every single time. Again, that's a very clear value add to you. And again, you being everyone who's watching this right now, right? That makes total sense. What if I've enjoyed this? If I've got all the way to the end of the episode and I've loved hearing from this guest, and that's what they've then shared, why the hell wouldn't I take that as a next step? So what does this mean for you? When you're being a guest on these shows, ask yourself, what's the logical next step? What are the loops I've opened, strategies I've mentioned that wasn't the full picture? How do I complete that picture for the audience who are listening in right now? How do I give them an offer where it just makes sense that they take it? Whereas, like, yeah, obviously, why the hell wouldn't I take this? And that's how you then generate the lead. And then from there, you then, of course, you'd have your systems to reach out, share them the valuable resource. And it's going to be important. It needs to be personalized. You can't just automate this, send it to people individually, and then open up the sales conversation at that point, and then get them booked in if you have like a sales process, or send them to a specific program afterwards. But the first thing is actually getting them to take action into your ecosystem.
Yeah. And like when you just even pitched that to me, it was so enticing. Like if I wanted to be pitching podcasts right now, I'd be like, yes, I need that file. That seems like exactly what I need to save my time. Final question for you. I know I've kept you a little longer, but I have a lot of, this has just been a good conversation. So, how can somebody, like, as they're doing the podcast interviews and they're getting on podcasts, how can that build credibility for them to land even bigger opportunities?
That is a great question. So if you think about it this way, right? All the industry leaders, experts, people who sponsor people, you know, all the industry leaders you look up to are all what? They all listen to podcasts. So when they start seeing your name pop up, you tell me what happens to your credibility. What happens to how people view you? What happens to the level of respect you actually attract? What happens when you then pitch to another show and that host has listened to you on their favorite podcast? So it creates this flywheel where your name builds, your credibility builds, and the bigger your name and credibility, the more people will actually go, more podcasts will actually start inviting you. Hey, I listened to you on this show. I thought you were fantastic. I would love to get you on my podcast because I want to talk about X, Y, and Z. The flip scripts where you go from you being the pitcher to you being the person who's being pitched to be a guest on other people's shows. That's the power in the network, that podcast. That's the power. That's the power of guesting on podcasts, the flywheel taking place. So it starts off slow, then happens all at once.
Yeah, that makes total sense because I barely pitch anymore, but I get pitches all the time. So people want me on their podcast, they want me in their conference, they want to be on my podcast. I don't even have to do that work anymore because I can just pick which opportunities I want. So that is the power of being a guest on different podcasts.